This town of 20,000 on the border of the Amazon rainforest is one of the most undersourced in all of Brazil. But what Atalaia do Norte lacks in schools and doctors, it makes up for in churches and preachers, one on almost every street.
Christ will come again, this time to the Peruvian city of Cusco.
For decades, Atalaia has been a magnet for Christian missionaries across the world, like Josh McIntyre from Alabama. He says he moved here to answer God's call. But for others, Atalaia is a crucial stepping stone to the Javari Valley Reserve, home to the largest number of isolated indigenous tribes in the world. Many Christians believe it's fertile soil for converting fresh souls, even if it means reaching out to people who want no contact with outsiders.
Evangelicals come here to entice the young with promises of a better life, then use them as guides to spread the gospel. If they insist on approaching our villages, we'll tie them up and destroy their planes and boats.
Brazilian legislation forbids any contact with isolated tribes. Keeping intruders out is often a challenge, even for this special squad of indigenous trackers who patrol a territory the size of Morocco. This is the outpost of the National Indigenous Foundation, the government agency in charge of protecting the isolated tribes of the Javari Valley. But it was unable to stop missionaries from entering their lands and trying to make contact with them. One American missionary is said to have been found by the Matisse people down this river, the Itaquai River. Andrew Tonkin, the American missionary, first arrived in Brazil in 2007. But Minya Matisse tells us that Tonkin eventually worked his way up the river and that members of his tribe caught the missionary on a non-authorized expedition in the Javari Valley.
The Matisse people were hunting when they came upon the American pastor, camping close to where the isolated peoples live. He was accompanied by 2 members of the Mayaruna tribe.
Tribal leaders say it's not the first time they've received reports of Tonkin breaking the law in the name of God. Now they've united forces against what they consider to be religious predators by taking them to court. Eliezer Marubo, the first indigenous lawyer from the Javari Valley, is the one responsible for bringing the lawsuit. The case was taken all the way to the Supreme Court.
We have information that tribesmen from the Javari Valley were offered $20,000 to accompany missionaries to parts of the territory occupied by the isolated people.
Al Jazeera asked Tonkin for a comment. He didn't confirm nor deny the accusations against him. But in an email, he told us that Jesus is still sending disciples into the world to preach the gospel to every creature, and that although Christ's followers didn't strike out to defy any government, they ought to obey God rather than men. In March 2020, the missionary posted a video on social media claiming to show him in another country.
I'm here in the city of Erbil. It's in northern Iraq.
COVID-19 forced all outsiders, including missionaries, to leave Brazil's indigenous reserves. Tribal leaders are fighting to keep them out for good, despite President Jair Bolsonaro's attempts to keep them there. During the pandemic, his supporters in Congress tried but failed to pass a law allowing missionaries to stay. Now even local villagers who have been converted, like this Mayaruna pastor, want them out.
They're using the Bible to spread dissent, to divide our people. Village chieftains who've not converted are being questioned by the younger generations, who say they won't obey leaders who aren't evangelical. That's not the way our societies work. And that's not what Christ has taught us. He died preaching peace and harmony, not intolerance.
Meanwhile, the legal battle over the missionaries and their contact with indigenous tribes continues to play out in Brazil's capital, Brasilia. Legislation allowing contact with isolated people is being discussed in Congress and the Supreme Court, just a year before President Bolsonaro runs for re-election. Monica Yanakiev, Al Jazeera, Javari Valley.